Hello, welcome to another Sonic Lab. Today we're looking at a new soft synth, or relatively new soft synth, from Native Instruments. It's called the Monarch, and it's a very simple synth on the face of it. It's an analog, modelled, monophonic, subtractive synthesizer. Now they don't say exactly which synth that it's modelled on, but I think we all know that it's basically the Mini Moog. If we take a look at it here, you can see that the similarities are pretty striking. We've got 3 oscillators, we've got a mixer section, noise, 24 dB low pass filter when in the MM mode. There are other modes as well, we'll talk about those later. 2 envelopes, which is attack, decay, sustain with a switchable release portion. You'll have noticed that there was a Reaktor logo at the top of that window, and that's because this plays as a Reaktor ensemble. An ensemble is a patch for Native Instruments' incredibly deep, incredibly complicated modular synthesis creation engine. You don't get that if you buy Monarch. You get to use it inside a player, although you can play Monarch inside a full version of Reaktor if you've already got it. So this is the triangle wave. Quite weighty. We've got the, this wave looks like a sort of cross between a triangle and a sine, sorry, a sawtooth and a sine. You see it's got a sort of funny little peak to it. This is full filter open, just straight open. Then we've got a sawtooth wave. Goes right down there because these filters, these oscillators also can all go into low frequency mode for sort of some really, let's say use them as LFOs essentially. Then we've got a square wave, which again, nice and buzzy. And finally, there's 2 variations on that wave. So they're like different settings of pulse width. Now, those of you who know me and have seen my synthesizer reviews in the past will know that I'm a really big fan of pulse width modulation, and I was a little bit disappointed not to see that, but to be honest, the original Mini obviously doesn't have pulse width modulation. So just coming back to the interface again, a bit more about the oscillators. We've got all of them have got the same range of waveforms. Oscillator 1 is fixed key tracking, so that's played via the keyboard, which is obviously via MIDI. Oscillator 2 is tunable, also has a low frequency mode. Oscillator 3, you can disable the key tracking effectively, so that means Oscillator 3 can be an LFO as well. Look, I'm dialing in pitch and filter modulation on a kind of a pulse width wave in low mode. Let's take that up. And it'll go right up into the audio rate, so you can get some real sort of mad ring mode, bell-like, almost kind of just crazy stuff. Now we've got the mixer section, which is pretty much the same. You can switch them on or off. And also we've got noise source, which is pink and white. So just coming back to the filters now, we're in the MM mode, which is a 24 dB low pass filter. We just to listen to this on the sawtooth. Done a great job on the interpolation here. It really is very smooth, and this is just being controlled by a MIDI controller. Add say 50% resonance there. Let's take it up a bit more. Speaking of resonance, we can actually, if we turn the oscillator off, pull the resonance up full, we can play it, and we've got the ability to switch in full key tracking. These goes in thirds, 1/3, and then 2/3, and then so you get 3/3 when you put them together. So yes, you can play the filter too. Put the oscillator back on, take the resonance down. Let's listen to some of the other modes of the filter. Low pass 2 is a 12 volt, 12 dB. These are all modelled on the Moog ladder filter. Add a bit of resonance there. got a 6dB, which is much gentler, almost bandpass actually, and then we got the bandpass filter, which I like because you can get some really nice sort of seesaw. Contour is the amount of envelope that's applied via the filter envelope. The envelopes are quite snappy, so if we quickly dial some in and get some real snap going, if we go up to here, and drop this down a bit. You can get some really snappy envelopes going on, and that's one thing that they say in the literature that goes along with this. Yeah, they wanted to make the snappy envelopes, the smooth characterful filter, make those kind of things really key. And one thing that you find when you're playing with Monarch, even though it comes with a ton of presets, you sort of start off in this kind of mode where you're flipping through presets and you think, oh, I want to make some drastic changes, where are the effects? But then when you slow down and you just think, right, let's listen to the sound of a single oscillator, let's dial in the filter and get meticulous about it, it really does have quite a lot of character. Another area where it really does win out are the load features. Now, on the original Mini Moog, there was an overload light that you could take the headphone, people would take the headphone out and plug it into the input, and it's therefore driving the filter. Now, we can actually emulate that. If I take the contour down, bit of resonance in there. Now if I bring the load, now if I can remember which one's load, not that one, it's this one, you get a bit of that sort of smudge and drive. It can sound really beefy and fat. I mean, obviously if we try some other waveforms, quite a lot of bottom end going on there, and there's even more that you can do. There's also a feedback circuit which they've built into it as well. It's got a couple of different flavors, and that can add some real extremities. I'll show you now. So if I just take the drive down a bit, and we'll switch the feedback circuit on, and then get some really extreme smudge and drive, more like a sort of overdrive and clipping almost. There's two circuits, that's the A one, the B one. There are a number of other parameters under the hood which allow you to sort of make it have more analog character. I'll show you now. So hitting the B setting brings up this selection of settings. There are three patches effectively, and these are sort of affect the global behavior of the synthesizer. Things like note priority, legato, the glide ramp, the pitch bend curve, the mod wheel, how much of it goes to the pitch, and the cutoff when in low frequency mode on the oscillator, or how much it goes up to the when it's in pitched mode. There's also oscillator tracking and tuning, those kind of things that add extra analogness to the sound. It's kind of almost imperceptible, but if I change the drift amount, you think you can hear it, but I can actually help you there. If I switch the tuning on and bring the drift amount on different notes, you can see that it affects just the sort of micro tuning, if you like, of the oscillators. So you can make it have a more of an analog feel, and it just gives you a bit more. There's also a leakage function which I quite like. Sounds kind of quite unpleasant, but it's just sort of general noise and filter leakage. So all of these things kind of go to make this feel more of an analog type machine. I know there's lots of people get really uppity about calling anything in software analog, but you know, that's what they've gone to model towards, so they can't help but use those terms. A new addition to the Reaktor 5 player, which you'll need to run the Monarch, is the ability to load and save presets. Although it is a little bit obscure, I'll show you how to do that now. So I'm in the standalone version of Reaktor. What I do is I go to the menu next to the search menu, File, Save Preset. I will call this Test 2, and it saves it to my folder. By the same token, I can open it as well in here. So loading and saving is no problem. Now, if I go to the live version, this is a plug-in version. I've still got the same menu, so I can open and save presets. If I go Open Preset, I navigate it to the folder, which was by default was Documents, Native Instruments, Reaktor 5, Library Presets. So a welcome addition there, and something that I know a lot of people have been looking out for. So if I flip through a few patches, I don't know about you, I can sort of almost hear it's out of tune. There is an analogness that you can, your ear is very sensitive to those perfections, and the fact that they've built this sort of weird, well, not weird, but wrongness to it does make it sound very authentic. I mean, if you ever played an original Minimoog, it's an absolute nightmare just to try and keep it in tune. And while this isn't going to emulate that, it does kind of make it a little bit unstable and a bit more kind of interesting. The only thing I would say is that obviously with a real analog synthesizer, you want kind of hands-on control, and that's part of the joy of it. But you can map MIDI controls very easily to it, and because there are so few, it's very easy. All we have to do is MIDI CC, OLA, right-click, and then wiggle your parameter and you're kind of done. So very easy to map there, though. One thing worth noting is each controller mapping is reserved to its own instance. So if you have multiple instances, you set a mapping up, it's only going to apply to the one you set the mapping in, and there doesn't seem to be any way to save those mappings and recall them, so it's a little bit clunky. Just a note on CPU usage. This patch appears to be using about 20%. If I just flip through a few programs, seems to hover between the 14 and 20 mark. And this is running on i7 2.4 gigahertz MacBook Pro with about 12 gigs of RAM. So sort of 12 to 15% for a single voice might seem a little hungry, but you're getting kind of fairly top-notch emulation here. You also notice it's running at 88.2 sample rate, internal sample rate, which is why you get this kind of high resolution oscillators and filters. So it's really down to price and that kind of thing. So the Native Instruments Monarch is €99. That's as it comes. You're gonna need the Reaktor Player 5.8 and above. So if you've got something already installed, you're gonna need to update that. System requirements are gonna be Windows 7 or 8, Service Pack 32, 64-bit, OS X 10.7 or 10.8 latest update. That's your minimum 2 gigs of RAM recommended. So on the whole, actually, I think it sounds pretty good, and it does feel like an instrument. It has a very kind of analog quality to it, if that's not sort of an oxymoron, because it is software. I think, though, to be honest, it's a bit expensive. I mean, €99 is 1/4 of an actual, say, an Arturia Mini Brew, which has a physical interface, which is an advantage to an analog synthesizer. So if it was a tad cheaper, it would be a no-brainer. Having said that, as a kind of almost a purist synthesizer with just oscillators and filters, with that level of degree of detail and tweakability, it does sound rather good.